Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Ariyana Love, and I'm reporting with the Liberty Beacon and OPTV. I want to discuss some things. This is a follow-up from the last live stream, the last broadcast I did with Jonas Arar. And I wrote about 4 pages, so I'm going to kind of read from them, but hold on, I'm going to wait for people to come into this live stream. It's an unusual time of the evening for me doing a live stream, so the usual people that I usually have might be a different crowd tonight. But I'll just give a couple minutes for people to come in. Hi, Ahmed. And thanks for joining. Okay, we've got like 5 people now. 6. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Oh, good. More people coming in. Great. So this live stream, this broadcast is a follow-up to a live stream I did with Jonas Arar. And there were some things that he said that didn't sit well with me. So I went ahead and did some research and compiled some information to give a more balanced view on the things that I didn't quite agree with. So here we go. What really happened with the Gaza protests against Hamas, the internal protests that happened last week? I consulted with the Palestinian media in Gaza and got inside information. So these are people I've worked with since 2014, very credible. So this has actually never been reported in any media, and it probably wouldn't be because, the Israeli occupation likes to hide these things. So in my last live stream, let's see. So the internal protests were against a new taxation on imported goods into the Gaza Strip. People were dissatisfied with the increase in tax of imported goods. Now, there were some reports of excessive force used against the protesters by the Hamas authorities. And this is true, there was, but there is a lot more to this story that needs to be told and was not reported by media. So according to, let's see. Okay, so there was, excuse me, so there was a conspiracy going on between the Israeli occupation and the Palestinian Authority, the PA in the West Bank. Well, just the Palestinian Authority all across Palestine, actually, to foil the Great Return March demonstrations. Ironically, the Great Return March demonstrations were originally organized by the PA, but now the PA is colluding with the Israeli occupation to sabotage them. There are some things that the PA has done recently to assist the Israeli occupation in tightening the siege on Gaza. President Abbas has cut salaries to 5,000 employees, either working for Hamas or those who do not support the Fatah movement in the Gaza Strip. Before this, Abbas cut payments to families of martyred and wounded Palestinians in Gaza. So I don't know if some people may not know that if somebody is martyred or wounded, they do get payments from the PA. To cut these payments is unconscionable. It's absolutely, there are no words. I mean, that is disgusting. There's some things that are sacred, and that's just something you don't do. But yet, Abbas did. The PA also cut the budget wait a minute. Cut the, sorry, I lost my place here. Okay, so also Abbas cut thousands of PA employee salaries in Gaza by half. Cut them in half, while the Palestinian Authority employees in the West Bank received their full salaries. Abbas also recently decreased the budget allocated for electricity in Gaza. Just reading the comment. Yeah, I'm going to get back to that, Mohammed, to the taxation. I'm going to cover everything in this. This is a very, very, very thorough report. All right, so I'm just giving the overall context of what has happened recently, what the PA has been doing to assist the Israeli occupation in tightening the siege. Hi, Abderrahman. Okay, so Abbas has also recently decreased the budget that was allocated for electricity in Gaza. This budget is paid by the PA to the Zionist occupation for electricity that goes to Gaza. The PA cut the budget, and so in turn, Israel cut the amount of electricity that Gaza receives. And again, this is to tighten the siege. This is how the PA and the Israeli occupation are working together to make the life more unbearable for the civilian population in Gaza. This is collective punishment. It is a war crime. All right, the PA and Abbas have also prevented transactions of medical treatment abroad in Zionist hospitals in occupied Jerusalem. For those who don't know, the PA is responsible for paying medical treatment for Gazans, the travel, and also the medical treatment in Israeli hospitals. So a lot of measures have been imposed on Gaza by Abbas in recent days, in recent months, that help tighten the siege and frustrate the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now, one PA official, and I didn't catch the name in this report, so I'm sorry. I mean, it's been reported in media, so people may have heard this, but a PA official was reported to have said, quote, "If we can prevent air to Gaza Strip, we will do it." So that should tell you what their mindset is. The PA, Israel, and the U.S. regime want to topple Hamas and all of the Palestinian resistance. Abbas does not care about the Palestinian people. He only cares about being a dictator. He wants everything to end in his hand. That's why he has remained in office the past few years without holding new elections. Abbas is technically illegally holding the office of President of Palestine. So he basically only has control over the West Bank territory, the occupied West Bank. And he does not have authority over Gaza, which pisses him off. Okay, Abbas has also appointed himself as head of the PLO, as well as being president. He is the representative of the Palestinian people at the UN. And he also, another example of this dictatorship behavior is the dismantling of an organizational body which he had no power over, called the Palestinian Representative Council. He dismantled it and declared it illegal. And so Abbas wants to dominate everything. And because of this, people in Gaza are living in utter poverty and tension. It is a contributing factor. Of course, the Israeli Zionist occupation is mostly responsible for the Palestinian people's suffering in Gaza, because they are the ones responsible for the siege. But the United States cutting, UNRWA, well, I'm going to get to that. Okay. So the PA is supposed to be the representative and protectors of the Palestinian people, but in fact, it works alongside the Zionist occupation to tighten the siege. They don't want Hamas in power. This is the bottom line. This is the reason for these measures. The The U.S. regime and the Israeli occupation want the Palestinian people in Gaza to give up their firearms. Does this sound familiar? This is, in fact, what the USA regime is trying to do in the United States right now with the American people since Obama. All right. So let's just remember for a moment what the Palestinian resistance and Hamas did in 2014. Every country and every people have a right to bear arms for self-defense. Hamas is a military resistance that was democratically elected in Gaza by the Gazan people. Hamas is the equivalent of the Ministry of Defense for Palestine. It is the only armed faction of defense for Palestine. So, you know, is comparable to the military of defense in the United States, for example. If the Palestinian people in Gaza were to disarm themselves, then they would be defenseless against Israeli ground invasion. Getting back to the internal protests, Palestinian intelligence, now this is inside information, Palestinian intelligence in the PA, in the West Bank, planned and implemented these internal protests in Gaza against Hamas. Most of the people in Gaza who participated in the protests were found out to be employees of the PA that had their salaries cut in half by the PA. So who is responsible for the suffering of those people? Now, there was a group of people misguided by the conspirators. Gaza security found communication between officials of the PA in the West Bank and officials of the PA in Gaza, who planned the protest in order to sabotage Gaza. The Gaza security also discovered a plan set up by the PA intelligence and the Israeli occupation forces, who conspired together to occupy the Gazan people with something that would distract them so that they would not attend the Great Return March demonstrations. The Israeli coordinator of Western regions, including Gaza, participated in a Twitter campaign that in Hebrew was called We Want to Live. And he called on the Palestinian people in Gaza to protest against Hamas authority, when he forgets that it's the Zionist occupation responsible for the siege in Gaza in the first place. So you see, these things tell of an agenda. This conspiracy was striving to make division between the Palestinian people and to distract them from participating in the Great Return March. Notice also that these internal protests erupted right before the one-year anniversary of the Great Return March and Land Day. So it's not a coincidence. Did Hamas make mistakes? Yes, they did. When the protests first broke out, Hamas did use excessive force. But this is normal for Gaza. Gaza is in war, and traitors in Gaza are not treated kindly. This is known, you know. Traitors are a very serious threat to security. So, but anyway, these were the things that the Gaza, security forces discovered, that there was collusion between the PA in Gaza and the PA in the West Bank, as well as a conspiracy between the PA and they intercepted communications between the PA and the Israeli occupation to sabotage the Great Return March demonstrations. That's the point. People who were protesting against Hamas were angry. Now there's more. And this is really, really important. The people who were protesting against Hamas in Gaza were angry at the increased taxation, the new taxation imposed on import goods into the Gaza Strip. They were told and believed that the new tax increase was imposed by Hamas authorities, but this was not true. Yes, Hamas does impose tax on imports, which is not excessive, and this is normal for any government to do. But the new taxes that were imposed on imports into Gaza is actually being imposed by the PA and collected by the PA, not Hamas. So, this lie was circulated on social media by the conspirators in order to mislead people and create division. It was a plan by the PA and the Zionist occupation to foil the Great Return March. All right. Who prevents Palestinians from protesting in the West Bank? Hi, Yusuf. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, he's confirming that that's completely right. Oh, thank you. Okay. Excuse me. Bismillah. Okay, getting back to the script here. That I wrote. I just wrote this tonight. Based on, the report from Palestinian media in Gaza and some research. Okay, so who prevents Palestinians from protesting in the West Bank? It is the PA and Israel. They have a security coordination where they work together to torture and brutalize any and all Palestinian resistance. They abduct, beat, and torture protesters. Well documented. And they're consistently doing this. The PA even hands over their own people to the Zionist occupation. The PA is also killing freedom fighters in the West Bank. They collude to oppress anyone who is even thinking about resisting occupation. For example, people have been abducted and beaten for Facebook posts by the PA. This is absolutely true. Okay, Omar Abu Layla is the most recent example. He was the last freedom fighter killed. I hope I got his name right. The Zionist occupation thanked the PA for giving them information on the location of Omar so that they could come and assassinate him. I mean, these things, this is unconscionable. I mean, talk about being a traitor. Who is the traitor? Anyway, last week, a Palestinian youth went to the West Bank, probably through, an illegal way or a dangerous way, unrecognized way, meaning without permission. He was abducted by the preventative security of the PA. He was a Palestinian youth, and this poor guy was tortured for 2 weeks, and then he died of the torture, and his body was sent to his mother in Gaza. His corpse was sent to his mother in the Gaza Strip. So the PA made an example of him by sending a message to Gazans not to cross over into the West Bank territories without official permission. The youth went to the West Bank in search of employment. His family says that he went there in search of employment so he could send money home to Gaza to feed his family. This is pretty barbaric measures. I'm going to just try to catch some of the comments here. Okay, Mohammed, your question, okay, I was just asked the question, if Hamas is not a government, why should they impose tax then? Well, they are a government. They are the ruling government body of Gaza, and they were elected. So it's quite normal thing to impose a tax. But the tax is not excessive, and it was not increased by Hamas. It was actually increased and imposed by the PA. And as a plot to blame it on Hamas and make it look like, make the people angry against Hamas. But it wasn't Hamas who did it anyway. So, and, there is a lot of blame against Hamas. They're very money oriented. Well, if you look at the overall context of, well, okay, I'm going to get into that. So I'm going to address these comments in my in the next bit of information. So I just have a little bit more information to get through. It's about Qatar. I'm going to talk about Qatar. In the live stream the last live stream broadcast I did with Jonas Arar, he was really against Qatar, and I did some research and found that actually Qatar has been quite supportive of the Palestinian people in Gaza. I mean the civilians. Jonas suggested that Hamas accepted $40 million from Qatar of Qatar aid at the expense of the Palestinian people, and suggested that this was a traitor move. That the Palestinian people don't benefit from that money, he suggested, and that it was on the blood of the Palestinian people. I didn't really agree with that, because I haven't seen that. But I went ahead and let him have the floor, and you know, everyone's got a right to express themselves. So, but anyway, I did some digging, and here are the facts. I don't see it as blood money. Basically, Gaza has been under siege. The siege has been tightened by the U.S., Israel, and the PA. So no money was coming into Gaza. And the Great Return March was depleting, you know, the entire hospital system in Gaza of everything. So, you know, in that context, everyone in Gaza is suffering and was depleted of money. So it makes perfect sense that, you know, beggars can't be choosers. And it makes perfect sense to accept Qatari aid. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's normal, a normal thing. And yes, the Palestinian people did benefit from it. Well, let's see, hold on. I want to go through this step by step. So, for example, the Trump administration had cut all U.S. aid to UNRWA last year. And this was a huge chunk of money. This is nearly a $400 million a year budget. That aid was going towards food aid, it was going towards medical aid and education for Gazans and Palestinians in the West Bank. Over 80% of Gazans are rely on food assistance, food aid to survive. It's actually over 80% now, since the 2014 assault. Okay, so this alone has caused Palestinian people to starve. And you see, the Zionists are really stupid. Their only tool in their toolbox is brute force. If they think that they can starve the Palestinian people into giving up their rights, they think that by starving them, they're going to hand over their capital city of occupied Jerusalem to the Zionists, something that Palestinians would rather die first than do. What starving the Palestinian people actually produces is it drives them to the demonstrations. When you have nothing else to lose, you're ready to put your life on the line, to shed your blood for your freedom, for your basic rights. They're not going to compromise them. They're going to put their lives on the line, as we see. That's the attitude of the Palestinian people. This is something that inspires me so much, how the Palestinian people inspire me. They're incredibly brave, incredibly strong people. And that the strength that comes from inside. And most people in the world don't have that. So, okay. So getting back to Zionists are stupid. Where was it going with this? So by starving Palestinian people, cutting them off from aid, it drives them to go to the protest, which is exactly what the Zionists don't want. If the Zionists were clever, on the other hand, if they had a compassionate gene in their gene pool, they would understand what motivates the Palestinian people. And however, you know, they have their weakness, which is psychopathy. And if the Zionists were clever, you know what they would do? They would fatten up the Palestinian people in Gaza. Yeah, flood them with food, get them fat, lazy, make life for them more tolerable, and make them comfortable, so that they would become complacent and they wouldn't go to the demonstrations. That's a good way to get them to stop demonstrating. It works in the West. I mean, it's exactly what's happened to Western cultures. But Zionists are not very clever. Okay, I digress. Let's get back to Qatar. So Qatar is the only government or international body in the whole world, okay, which built homes for the Palestinian people. After the 2000, that built homes in Gaza, replacing the 22,000 homes that were lost, that were destroyed by the Israeli occupation in the 2014 extermination. Okay, Qatar. Qatar gave $50 million to Hamas authorities for Palestinians whose homes were destroyed, to fund the rebuilding of shelters. And it resulted in over 2,000 housing units being built in 2016. Now, Qatar funded construction projects providing 1,000 new dwelling units for Palestinians left homeless in 2014, and another 1,060 housing units for low-income Gazans. All right, now if you think about, say there's 3 to 5 people in a family on average in Gaza, maybe 5 people in a family on average, I think it is. So that is close to the amount of people who lost their homes. I mean, it's close. The Zionist occupation was quite irked, meaning they were upset with this, and so was the PA. In fact, Qatar makes every effort to help the Palestinian people in Gaza in agriculture, electricity, infrastructure, and housing. This was reported by Reuters. The construction of new housing units was being hindered not by Hamas, but by the Zionist occupation, who hampered the import of building materials into Gaza. A year later, in 2017, in July of 2017, Qatar, together with several other Gulf and Arab countries, signed an agreement with Gaza construction companies to build more housing units in Gaza. An additional $5.5 million was devoted towards the construction of 8 new housing buildings. This was 1 month after an embargo was imposed on Qatar by other Middle Eastern countries. So, Qatar was determined, anyway, they are determined to continue to help the Palestinian people. So, who is the traitor? That's the big question. Now, you know what? I was just asked, am I a Hamas supporter? I support the Palestinian people. Hamas are Palestinian people. Hamas are the military arm for Palestine. They are the only military defense that Palestine has. They're needed. So yeah, in that sense, I do support them. Their reports are credible. Their behavior during times of war, they abide by the rules of engagement of war. I can see this since I've been watching them since 2014. For that, I respect them. When they walk away from the negotiating table with the Israeli occupation, it is because they are refusing to negotiate human rights. This is what I saw. This is what I've seen repeatedly. So, do I agree with everything that they do? No, of course not. But, it's not even my opinion. It's just my opinion. It's the Palestinian people's opinion about Hamas that matters. They are the ones who elected them. And I think that overwhelmingly still the Palestinian people do support Hamas, and they do support being armed. I mean, what Israel and what the United States and what the PA are conspiring towards is to disarm the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now, what would happen if Hamas and the Palestinian resistance in Gaza put down their arms? What would happen? Well, there would be absolutely no defense for ground invasion. I mean, okay, let's face it, the rockets don't do much, but they're getting better. Hamas rockets do reach Tel Aviv, or they're getting close. They can extend further. There's more and more damage that Palestinian resistance is able to do. What was I going to say? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Mohammed Kal says, unfortunately, some people are trying to demonize Hamas. Well, they use Hamas to demonize the Palestinian people. This is what's happening. The media, the mainstream media, the Israeli occupation, the United States government, and even the PA. They're using Hamas as the excuse to demonize the Palestinian people. Any resistance against occupation. In 2014, Israel attempted ground invasion multiple times. They got sabotaged by the Palestinian resistance. Palestinian resistance, they were brilliant in their strategies in fighting. The very first invasion was from the north, and it was secret. Israel didn't announce that they were going to do it. And they was absolutely sabotaged. I mean, they were coming up out of the ground and, tackling the Zionist forces, and they ran back across the border, bloodied and killed and wounded, and they were then they had to make a report in the media the next day. So suddenly they were the victim, but it was embarrassing for them. It was really, really embarrassing for them. And they tried to, cover it up, but I'll never forget it. It was hilarious to me. I mean, I was like, you got this, one of the fourth largest military power, strongest military power in the world, and they just got snuffed on their first ground invasion attempt. Now, what would happen if the Palestinian people in Gaza were not armed? What would happen if they didn't put money into defense? They'd be sitting ducks. The Zionists could just roll right in with their tanks and do whatever they want to the Palestinian people in Gaza. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to disarm them. It's never, and it's probably never going to happen. Look, we know that there is corruption in any government in the world. Every government is corrupt. I am sure that Hamas is no different. Come on. There's a saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But compared to the Israeli occupation, compared to the U.S. regime and the Trump administration, Hamas are saints compared to them. I mean, you can't compare, And no, of course, Hamas are not saints, but they at least are credible. Their reports are credible. They're old school. Whereas, the Zionists rely on deception. The motto of the Mossad is, quote, by deception thou shalt do war. There's no honor in that. There's no integrity in that. They're not men. If a man doesn't have his honor and, something to fight for, you're not a man. The United States government passed laws making it legal to lie to the people in the press. There's no more there's no more. So now the United States government can lie to the whole world. Whenever they want to, they do it all the time. There's no integrity in that. There's no you can respect that. Can't respect it. At least the reports of Hamas are credible. This is what I see since 2014. And it surprised me because what I always saw in the mainstream media is this demonization. And so, I'm just giving the fuller picture. I'm not saying that everybody has to love them, but, I don't see them, they're not committing any threats or threats of terrorism against any government in the world. They're just resisting. They're just the Ministry of Defense for the Palestinian people. That's what they are. They should be accepted. They should be accepted just like we accept any government in the world. They shouldn't be, demonized. Gaza is in a state of war. When you're in a state of war, it's a different context. And it's known that anybody who commits, who is a traitor and conspires, for heaven's sakes, with the Zionists, okay? Imagine that. They are not treated kindly by Hamas. Hamas has been known to execute people when need be who are traitors. And this is for security. If somebody is a traitor, they're risking people's lives, for heaven's sakes. That's an incredible security risk. So even the United States government has laws like this, that during times of war, if somebody is a traitor, they're executed. So what's the difference? I mean, it's just, but I'm sure they're doing that less and less, because that gives the mainstream media and gives the Israeli occupation a reason to demonize them more. So what I see Hamas doing is becoming more and more and more and more clever in their tactics. And, I have to give them credit for the Great Return March demonstration. They sat back and allowed for the Palestinian people, the civilians, to lead that demonstration and they didn't make any moves to provoke the Israeli occupation, no violent resistance whatsoever, and gave the floor to the Palestinian people in Gaza to protest and backed them up for a year, for an entire year, proving to the entire world that they can be nonviolent too, that they do support their people. And this is my opinion, and from what I saw, from what I can see. Nobody told me this. This is my opinion, okay? This is just how I see it. People can take it or leave it. I do respect Hamas for these things, okay? They are better, in my opinion, than the U.S. government. They are better than the Zionists, in my opinion. And they are better than the PA, too. And Abbas. I mean, I don't want to get myself in trouble by, attacking the PA or something. I mean, I really want to have good diplomatic relations with all factions in Palestine. But this is the truth. And as a journalist, I have a duty to tell the truth. And of course, I'm, also giving my opinion, which may be valuable, because I'm watching closely the news that's going on in the occupied Palestinian territories since 2014. I've been watching closely. Yeah, exactly. If Gazans were not armed, he says if Gazans, okay. Well, yeah, we have somebody in here who doesn't like Hamas, and that's fine. You have your personal experience, and I don't know what that is. And, there are some people that just really don't like Hamas. Fine. That's your right. And, there are going to be those people. That's just fine. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. And the Palestinian people do not all see eye to eye on things. But my vantage point from where I'm standing and what I'm seeing and is, I know Hamas can be brutal, and they were brutal against these protests. But look what they discovered. They discovered people colluding with the Israeli occupation. That's treason. That's being a traitor. Okay, that is really the most serious crime that a Palestinian person can commit. You have to think about that. So in that context, it makes sense they might beat them up. I mean, come on, or imprison them or something. So anyway, that's the bigger picture. That is the bigger picture. And so That was an attempt by the Israeli occupation and the PA to sabotage the Great Return March, the one-year anniversary of the Great Return March, and to sabotage the Great Return March demonstrations. It didn't work. It wasn't successful. And now everybody can know that that taxation actually is being imposed by the PA and collected by the PA. So that is the truth. And people were manipulated into believing that that new taxation was being imposed by Hamas. So you see the trickery here? Yeah. Yeah, and I know. I mean, you know, okay, so somebody in the house says he was tortured by Hamas. Well, that may be true. That may be true. You know, the U.S. government has for a long time had relations with Syria and sent political prisoners to Syria for torture because, you know, we couldn't do that on our own soil. Now we have Guantanamo Bay, and so, you know, the U.S. government can just send people there for torture, right? So, you know, governments are brutal. Governments are brutal. I'm always on the side of the people first. I'm always on the side of human rights first. But every Palestinian person has the right to resist the Israeli occupation. Everyone. And all forms of resistance are valid, whatever it is. If it's through taking up arms, if it's with your pen, with your voice, making art, it all contributes. Any form of resistance, any action you take to resist is valuable. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this. I'm finished. That's all that I had to say. And, you know, bless you all for tuning in, and please share. Please share this live stream. And peace be with you, and free Palestine.